Okay, next is call to order a meeting, special meeting of the Glendale City Council. It'll be called at 3:43 p.m. on October 29, 2013. May we have a roll call?
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Taro.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here. And your report, please.
The agenda for the October 29, 2013 special public meeting of the City Council is posted on Thursday, October 24, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before you is a public hearing. Director of Community Development regarding proposed ordinance amending Title 5 and 8 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995, establishing a smoking permitted area license at 1A is an ordinance for introduction.
This is a public hearing. I will open it. I just want to get ahead of the game. I don't want to forget. Okay, Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. Several months ago, the City Council effectively banned smoking within new apartments and condominiums, and at that time wanted to make sure that there was a mechanism in place for further controlling and enforcing smoking regulations. And so you directed that we return to you with a licensing procedure for such smoking areas within these buildings. And so with that, we'll have our program specialist, Felipe Escandar, give you a brief update on where we are and introduce the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Ochoa. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, as Mr. Ochoa mentioned, my name is Felipe Escandar with the City Community Development Department, Program Specialist. And as he mentioned, we're bringing back in front of you today, per your request, a license for consideration to license smoking permitted areas. I'll begin to just preface this by we are not proposing any changes to the regulations that govern the smoking within Glendale, for example, distance or areas which are allowed. Currently, the city has 26 smoking permitted areas which are known to staff. The procedures which we have that govern these areas, staff, when a individual business wants to have one of these locations on their site, they may or may not approach staff. Currently, the ones that they approach staff will go out and visit that site and assess the appropriateness of that site per our regulations. What we're proposing is this new license will require these businesses to submit a site plan and go through our licensing procedure so that we can more effectively regulate these licensed areas throughout and better know of these locations throughout the city. The license will assist in code enforcement, code compliance, in multiple ways by requiring the site plan that the business has for the smoking designated area to be posted so that patrons can see where this area is. As such, staff, when going to inspect such areas, can see that site plan and know where the seats, tables, and markers are for that smoking designated area. And staff can review these licenses on an annual basis through our renewal procedures to make sure that the business and the smoking permit area remains compliant. What we plan is that outreach will be conducted to the 26 smoking permitted areas that are currently in place that we know of through letters and contact with those businesses. We will be developing an application packet so that the businesses know what the procedures are and to make it fairly simple for them to convert their smoking designated area into a smoking permitted area with a license. Fees were adopted for this license back in June with the 2013 and 2014 citywide fee schedule. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Quintero.
I actually have a question. How about the commercial restaurants?
The residential, you mean?
No, I know this is residential. I'm just...
Both for commercial and residential. That's what I came up to say, that the licensing will be required for both residential and commercial areas where there is a designated smoking area.
Okay, because I'm looking through the materials, I couldn't quite find that. And so what's not changing is what we decided on in terms of square footage, distance, and all the rest of it.
It actually makes the enforcement considerably tighter than what it's been in the past.
Right. And also a new business or a new apartment building going up will be able to work within these guidelines and so then I guess my final question is, I'm surprised we're doing it this afternoon rather than in the evening, since we've always had so much input from the public.
Well, the reason that we requested to bring it in the afternoon was that you actually had substantial discussion on this item when you directed staff to come back with a licensing procedure. There was never a question of whether or not you wanted a licensing procedure, because you discussed that, and in fact, that was one of the reasons I think some of you were a little bit more comfortable with the new regulations, and the community understood that. So we thought it's a matter of establishing the procedure, because we're getting inquiries as to what do I have to apply for in order to get my license.
The other good thing will be, if somebody goes into a restaurant, sees smoking, they can look and see if there is the signage. If not, they'll know, yeah, I can call the city and say, hey, there's smoking going on. There's no licensing here. The way it is now, you don't know. So,
Or frankly, if there's a license, it can be revoked as well if they're non-compliant.
true.
And the 26 areas that are currently permitted or in the future, will they be available online? Can you go to our website so we can?
If that is the direction that the council would like us to follow, we will make that available online.
Yes.
I think
Okay,
that would be the easiest
Yes,
way for
absolutely.
people to,
We do that.
including possibly the owner of a establishment or apartment unit or president of the condominium association can actually go online themselves and show whoever is inquiring or complaining.
And they could see whether or not, if a person is smoking, consistent with the smoking license for their building or not.
We'll have a number of business. People coming to Glendale in the future as we develop more out downtown. And I think a good many of them will want to know, is this restaurant allow smoking or if it doesn't? So there's a lot of benefits to it. Mr. Ndajaya?
So what's the current status of our residential smoking? Let's say some of these many of our downtown places have rooftop areas, and smoking is permitted in the rooftop, is it not?
Well, right now, that's a very good question. Other than the 26 areas where we have been involved, we don't know whether or not people are following the smoking ordinance requirements. So with the licensing procedure, we don't know. The first answer is that we don't know currently what the status is, but we can say that to the extent that they apply for these licenses and the buildings that have not already been part of the unpermitted smoking, you banned smoking in the new buildings, but some of those buildings were actually in process, so they did not get subject to that no smoking permitted. So they will have to apply, and we will designate the rooftop smoking areas accordingly.
Okay, so how will we, I thought this was a good idea, I think, at one time, but I'm thinking now, so our inspector could essentially knock on any business or any multi-residential property and say, I'm here to inspect you to see if you're complying with the smoking license. Is that
Well,
correct?
we don't do unsolicited calls like that. However, right now we get calls from people that say, somebody is smoking and I think they're not complying with the smoking ordinance. And unless we send someone over there and then check out at that moment to see where that person smoking was standing or sitting and compare that with our regulations, we won't know. However, by having this license and a site plan on the wall, the person can easily be referred to that and say, are they within the designated smoking area? If they are, then they are smoking in a permitted area. Otherwise, we can then send code enforcement to deal with that.
When we did our smoking ordinance, I don't believe we mandated that the smoking area be fixed and permanent and not movable.
We did not mandate it as such, and still we won't mandate it. We will want to work with the owners to designate the smoking permitted area, and once they designate it, that's the designated area unless they change it.
Okay, let's say an owner wants to change it.
Then they can come and...
I want to move it from, I'm having a bridal shower this weekend, so I want to move the smoking area from here to there.
That will be
Come in,
subject... Yes.
Inspector comes in and says, aha, your map that you gave us says smoking is in this corner, but you're smoking in this corner, here's your ticket.
Not
that's
necessarily. I mean, that could end up being a special event
That's a
permit
special
or,
event
or
permit.
anything like that. But I get your point that to the extent that they are changed, we could change the permit administratively through the Community Development Department. and that can be, I would think we'd want to be as flexible as we can, but as reasonable as possible. So if you have a renegade building owner that he has or she has smoking in this corner of the rooftop garden, next week it's this one, this one, this one, and pretty much it moves so often it's just confused in the entire thing. There's no practical way to do the enforcement. At that point, we would have to exercise discretion of our jurisdiction to say, no, you can't just go and switch these things like you change your socks. But at the same time, I don't think, unless the council directs otherwise, that once you designate it, it's forever this location.
Well, I'm sorry if I may add, the most of, if not all, of the businesses that have smoking designated areas do not have the flexibility and the space to move it that easily. Some do. There are 2 or 3 that might be able to do that. In those businesses, we
Certainly
can always...
the commercial businesses, absolutely. Right. You're putting so much money into what the designated smoking place would be to comply with the other elements of our smoking ordinance. It realistically isn't going to change very much at all.
And if they do, we can always change it. This is not going to become written on stone.
I'm speaking more to the rooftop gardens and the apartments.
Yeah, I mean, I want to afford the property owners as much flexibility as possible in the configuration of their smoking areas. I don't want them to be limited to a set plot plan and be penalized if at any time an inspector walks in and says, oh, your area has moved from here to there.
Well, again, our code enforcement and code compliance will not necessarily be so heavy-handed that usually, if there is a complaint and we send someone over there and we discover that people are violating the distancing requirements or they have changed the designated smoking area, which is, like I said, very rare and difficult for the owners to do, then all we need to do is send them a warning and say, have you changed your plans? Are you planning on changing your plans? And if we see repeated violation, then we will go after that.
And we do have the administrative citation ordinance that will come online early next year that should curb that by monetary fines.
Does this ordinance have the enforcement, the violation enforcement, penal provisions in it?
That will come back, as the city manager just said. We are coming up with the administrative citations with the city attorney's office that will cover that much more comprehensively than what we have in process right now, which is basic prosecution after several attempts of compliance.
Mr. Friedman.
Yeah, it does give the authority to enforce them.
This is not, as I see it, an ordinance in search of a problem. I get a lot of complaints from people who think that there might be a violation, but when we look into it, it turns out there's not, because there's a lot of confusion, especially in apartment buildings, about where people are and are not allowed to smoke.
Correct.
We get constant questions and constant complaints. And it's my hope that if this does anything, that what it will do was by having those site plans published at the locations, those residents will know. So they won't have to call us necessarily and be told, oh, no smoking is allowed there. They'll know as a non-smoker where they can go to enjoy a smoke-free environment, and they'll know as a smoker where they can go if they're in a building that allows smoking. It's the same with restaurants to some extent. I hear from people all the time complaints about smoking in restaurants where they think that we don't allow smoking in restaurants at all. And they don't know when it's allowed, when it's not. I've heard a lot of people say, well, they were smoking near a sidewalk. That can't be allowed. Well, it actually is allowed under our code. So this will give some clarity to people, both customers and residents. I think business owners, if they're following the rules, will get less complaints. Have people who are happier because they know where they should be sitting or shouldn't be sitting. So in my mind, this is less about enforcement, even though that might happen, but much more about educating the public, educating residents, giving business owners something very predictable to follow so that they know that they're following the rules. So I do think that it's worth a try. We can always come back. We should take a look at this again in a year. I hope it comes back to us in a year and let us know what the response is and the reaction is from the business owners, from the apartment owners, how it's working, if it's decreasing complaints, if it's getting more code compliance. That's the goal as far as I see it.
Mr. Quintero.
In terms of apartment rentals and condominiums, what it also means, condominium purchases, what it also means is when that person goes to that location, they're going to physically know, oh, gee, the unit I'm about to rent or buy is 10 feet from the smoking area. So I think that's also a big plus.
Thank you. Any other question? Mrs. Sinania?
Just a general comment. I wish that we concentrated more on and put resources in educating the general public about the dangers involved with smoking, to both to the smoker and to everyone else. I'm afraid again that the enforcement is going to be problematic because code enforcement is going to deal with these. With the reports?
This will go through our licensing, which is under code compliance, which is planning and code compliance in one division. So this will be done through the licensing staff at the public counter, and much in the same way that we do other licenses.
The license itself, but once a problem arises,
Well, that already goes to code compliance right now, and that'll continue going to either the police department or code compliance are the ones that get the call, and that'll continue. We do think, though, that with this information, we'll get fewer calls.
And
you'll
we-
get fewer calls.
Correct.
And we have
Plain
done,
calls. Yes.
we have done a lot of community education,
Right.
and on plastic bags, and on shopping carts, right? All of them, we spent a lot of time
Yes,
educating.
yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like substantive education, Mr. Mayor. I mean, you could educate people ad nauseum on this issue because the stakes are so high, and because the education is the best way to get people to quit smoking. It seems like the concentration is more on punitive measures and on administrative measures to control smoking or control those who smoke. Again, the people who smoke are afflicted. It's sort of the disease in essence. It's an addiction. So again, they're going to have problems, and I hope our residents and our city staff and police don't become mired in having to enforce things and go out there and have to do investigations about whether someone was smoking, wasn't smoking, was smoking in the right place, not the right place. That's what I'm worried about. But again, I'll support it. I mean.
And refresh me, on the Americana, which is a no smoking by choice by Cruise unaffiliated, don't they have a few sites inside for smoking, or is the whole facility non-smoking?
Yes, my understanding, and so is Mr. Escander's understanding, is that the entire facility is non-smoking.
I haven't seen it, but I'm just curious. They have the signs up, no smoking facility. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is an ordinance for introduction.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing, and then Mr.
I
Quintero
will
did his
introduce the
speech.
ordinance.
I got halfway. I opened it, just forgot to close it.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we stand adjourned at 4 o'clock. And now, closed session.
Yes. If you'll allow me to take roll. Council members Friedman,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Caro,
Here.
Sinanian,
Here.
Mayor Weaver.
Here, please read the closed session items into the record.
1A is conference with legal counsel pending litigation pursuant to subdivision D1 of Government Code Section 54956.9, case name unspecified so as not to jeopardize existing settlement negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Do you expect reporting out?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that was set to closed session.